You can tell it's real because it looks so fake.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Look Into It Tonight. My favorite doctor of all time, back for the third time, Mr. Andrew KAUFMAN. How you doing, Andrew?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's good to be here. I just got back from Texas for an Eclipse related event.
What do you think about the eclipse? Was that all bullshit or what?
Well, here's what's most interesting about it, aside from all the rituals that were being done, I'm sure you heard about. But if you look at, this eclipse, it kind of occurs in a pair with the one in 2017. And if you look back to the early 1800s, they had the same kind of pair. And about 3 months after the second one, back then in the 1800s, there were a series of earthquakes that occurred along a particular fault line in the United States. So I think it'd be interesting to see, if the same thing happens. We did have an earthquake in New Jersey right before the eclipse. That was a little unusual place for an earthquake. So, let's see what happens in early July.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of the eclipse at all. I didn't even think about it. Oh, don't look at the sun. Monday was just a regular day for me. It didn't change at all for me, but I don't know if it was a distraction, get everyone to think about the eclipse. And then maybe if some shit happens, blame it on the eclipse. Oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe earthquakes are underground cities being blown up or something. You know what I mean?
Could be. Could
I
be.
mean,
You
I
think
mean,
that was going on back in the 1800s?
if they were, I don't know how much you know about the Tartaria field of history. Are you into it at all, like old world
Oh, yeah,
architecture?
well, I have looked at that, and I even have the original textbook from the Russian historian who kind of coined it. I can't remember his name right now. But there certainly are a lot of inconsistencies about things in history. Like if you look at Australia, for example, they had evidence, right, that this great city was built, like Sydney, for example, or Melbourne. I'm not sure which was the first one built, but there's all these huge buildings and infrastructure, and it happened in like, just a few years after it was first settled. And it's not possible, right, that those first settlers just built such structures like that. There has to be a different explanation. I think the same thing is true in the United States. I mean, I've gone to small towns. My girlfriend is kind of an aficionado of looking at this architectural history. And, we see evidence of subterranean buildings, like buildings that were buried where there's the first floor is now underground. And so, was there something, mud flood that covered it, or something that made it sink into the ground, and why is that? And then all this ornate architecture and work of craftsmen and carvings and intricate various types of architectural elements. And it's like, well, why don't we build things like that anymore? We have more technology, right, more resources, more wealth now, but our buildings are just boxes that are shiny, basically.
You know what I noticed about, because now once you are awake to the timeline, our historical timeline being flawed, to say the least, you start noticing old world buildings in every city you go into. It's crazy. And the one thing that I noticed is the old world buildings are lit up from the outside. They have like lights lighting up the outside. And the new world buildings are lit from the inside out. I don't know if that has anything to do with symbolism or Freemasonry or fucking satanic rituals. I don't know. But it seems like maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a sign. That's how the controllers let people know, like, that's one of the structures from the old world. We're gonna light it up from the outside. right? You know what I'm saying? You're going to start noticing that too. I notice it all the time.
No, I never heard that detail, but it's quite interesting because, just on the surface, right, normally our natural light is the sun. So the sun always comes from the outside. We don't have a sun inside our buildings, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
the light from the outside shining in kind of simulates the sunlight in a way.
yeah, and it makes the building look amazing, and it highlights the building. It might be like, this is one from the old world, boom, like a little shout out, like a little graffiti tag or something. I don't know. It just seems that way. Like all the old buildings are lit from the outside in, and all the new buildings are from the inside out, and they're all. And now, like, I just look at modern day buildings as like mental institutions slash prisons. They're just built like shit. You know what I mean? And now,
Yeah,
like,
well, there's one prison that's actually one of these old world buildings that you might check out. It's called Auburn Prison in New York. It's one of the oldest prisons in the country, I believe.
yeah, it makes sense that if to hide history, the old structures that still exist, turn them into insane asylums, turn them into prisons, turn them into museums, and keep people away from them, basically, to like really figure out what the fuck they're doing. Is this it right here?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, they make
I had to do a psychiatry rotation there in my training.
in the prison.
Yeah.
So you used to interview prisoners?
Yes, I interviewed them and provided psychiatric treatment in a couple, like in state prison and a state like psychiatric hospital, prison psychiatric hospital, and then also in the jail.
Whoa. You must have insane stories about that.
I do have some insane stories. I even testified in a murder trial.
Against the guy you were interviewing, or
Well, I mean, I didn't take sides. I was the expert witness. So I was hired by the defense, though, for a very strange insanity related defense in New York only, called an extreme emotional disturbance. And I think the original case has something to do with a wife insulting her husband in a very sharp way, let's say, or possibly was having an affair. And then he, lost his temper with such extreme emotion that when he killed her or killed the guy she was having the affair with, it wasn't considered murder, it was manslaughter. So it would drop it down. And that's the difference between 25 years to life versus 10 to 15 years in prison. So it's pretty significant.
did he get manslaughter?
Well, he got convicted of murder, but he got the sentence for manslaughter. So I think the jury thought he was guilty of murder, but the judge agreed with my opinion and gave him the sentence for that, because judges have discretion to do that.
Yeah. In some states, isn't it legal? Like if you catch someone banging your wife inside your house, you could shoot them or something like that. Isn't there like one state? Like,
Well, I mean, that, if it's in your house, then the castle doctrine is there. You could, think that he's raping your wife, perhaps. But
Yeah.
no, I don't think, you don't have the right to defend adultery with murder. There has to be a threat to your life in order to use lethal force.
Is there any country out there that's legal? Like if the guy banged
Oh,
your wife, you could
geez.
kill him? Probably like in the Middle East, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I know that some places have some horrible practices. Like if a woman is accused of being, unfaithful or promiscuous, like in some parts of India, they would throw acid on their face.
That's not cool.
No, it's definitely not cool. I mean, you can, find stories like that if you look around. It's a horrible practice, but it's tolerated. I think they don't face criminal prosecution for that,
That's
as
crazy.
far as I'm aware.
Yeah. So I wanted to circle back and go over the whole viruses. There's no proof that viruses cause illness, and that's a big hoax. I want to start off with, obviously like smallpox, right? If someone asks you about like, if that's true, what about smallpox? Like we've
So,
gone over this
Eddie,
before.
that's
Yeah.
what you call a straw man fallacy. You
Yes.
ever heard of that?
I've heard that a bunch of times. But I'm not an expert on debating with fallacies and all that stuff. Although I'm getting better, I am following a couple guys and like a Mind Shock. This guy on YouTube, Mind Shock. His whole channel, his whole podcast is about dissecting debates with and then calling out all the fallacies. There's so many. What is there, like a 50 of
Yes.
them? There's so many. And there's so many to keep track of. And it's an art in itself to be able to debate with all the fallacies. And it's like a
Well,
scientific debate.
you're right. You're right. It is, part of the art of debate, but it's really logic, right, and reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that it's not really about debate. It's about how do you, look at evidence out there and decide what's true and what's not. Because, so the first thing with this issue is you just first got to ask, what is the question that you want to answer? So if you want to talk about like the generality of do disease causing viruses exist, well, then you have to look at how are they discovered or shown to be in existence. But then if you say, well, okay, there's this disease, well, how do you explain that? Or what is the explanation of disease if it's not viruses? Well, that's a totally separate question. And we can talk about that question. We could talk about it for smallpox or any other, particular illness. But in general, the first thing, if you're going to make a claim that, viruses are responsible for something or they cause disease, let's just first say, okay, have there actually been viruses that are discovered? Because what's actually happened with this is that they use, what I call a simulation to create the appearance that these things are real, but it's all just smoke and mirrors. And remember who was the professor in England who made the computer model predicting that millions and millions of people were going to die from COVID, and that was the reason for the lockdowns? Do you remember that?
I remember all that shit, but I don't remember the doctor's name that perpetuated that.
Well, it's not important. He's
Dr.
kind
Neil
of a weasel
Ferguson.
anyway.
Dr.
There you
Neil
go, Ferguson.
Oh shit. Okay.
Right, because later on he was caught violating the lockdown with his girlfriend or something like that, and but anyway, he did the same thing for previous epidemics or potential pandemics. So he just put a bunch of inputs into a computer modeling software and gave the appearance that there were going to be this huge wave of deaths, right? But you could put different inputs into that computer and predict that, oh, nothing's going to happen, or you could put in different inputs and say that 90% of all people are going to die, and get that as an outcome. And they did the same thing with climate change, right? The international agency that pulls out that report every year, it's always computer models. But with that one, just like with Ferguson's, you can actually look, did the temperature increase by the predicted amount by the computer model? And of course, every time it was proven to be incorrect. So they did the same thing to create the appearance of these viruses, using simulations rather than actually, just taking them out of nature and showing what their DNA sequence is so you could develop a test. They developed a test on a DNA sequence, but they never showed where that sequence came from. It was only simulated in a computer. It wasn't actually from something in nature. And so they did a couple of these kinds of techniques to give that appearance, and that convinced people. So, what we have to look at is what's the actual primary evidence. We can't look at this other stuff like the fact that there's a test or that you see pictures of something. But what actually is the something? Where did it come from? Is it, from sick people in nature, or is it something else?
Yeah. So like in regards to the Spanish flu, you sent me a study, and the study, I looked it over, first study I ever looked into, but it was one where they took 100 prisoners who were healthy and took 100 people that had the Spanish flu mixed up their saliva, spit. They got close together. They even injected the blood of the sick into the healthy, and they found that nobody got sick. Can you talk a little bit about that study?
Yeah, Eddie, I'm really glad you brought that up because this other guy who is, sort of someone in this camp where have been reading the literature and analyzing the science, his name's Daniel Roydus, and he just came out with a book. I think it's called Can You Catch a Cold? And so there's that study that you mentioned from the U.S. Public Health Service, but there are other published studies, although a lot of them are kind of buried. They're hard to get. So what he did is he spent the last 3 years finding every study he could find on contagion. And he found in colds and flu, and that's all that's in the book. So he did find stuff on other diseases, but he's going to write about that separately. There were about 70 studies on cold and flu for contagion, and 90% of them showed no one got sick at all. And they tried, just like in that study, right? They did the first experiment, tried to just take up all the snot and put it in their mouth and nose, and no one got sick. So then they did something else, right? They tried to inject it in the skin. So they tried really hard in all these studies, and they even used unnatural ways, like injecting it, right? Now, I mean, we might get injected by a bee, but we're not talking about bee venom reactions here. We're talking about colds. And still, nobody got sick in all those studies. Now, in the other 10%, there was some sickness, but it was shown not to be due to any germs. So, for example, there was a study, and I had known about this actually before his book, where they had a bunch of people with colds, and they took their snot, and they actually took the snot of many people and combined it into one sample. And then they had a bunch of healthy people, and they injected a solution up their nose, and they told them all that it was the snot from all those people with colds. But they actually gave half of them a solution that was just salt water, and the other half, they actually gave them the snot from those other people. Now, a few people in both groups got cold symptoms, okay? But the group that just got the salt water up their nose, they actually got more colds in that group than the group that actually got the snot. So this is super helpful to explain what happened during COVID, because you have to say, well, why the hell did those people get sick? We know that salt water does not give you a cold, right? And the reason is the same reason that the people got sick in both groups. It had nothing to do with any germs in the snot. It had to do with their belief that they were going to get sick. And they actually manifested the illness as a result of that. And that is something that now there's more research on. It's called the nocebo effect. Just like how the placebo effect, right, can provide a benefit, the nocebo effect can manifest bodily harm. Like here's another experiment that was done with the nocebo effect, which is they had some cancer patients and they told them they were giving them chemotherapy, but they just gave them salt water. Now, they all got nauseated from the salt water, and some of them actually, a day or two later, lost their hair, like their hair started falling out, as if they had gotten real chemo, but they only had the belief that they were getting chemotherapy. They didn't actually get any drugs.
Wow.
So you see that if you're in a situation, right, where everyone around you or there are people around you getting sick and you're worried about getting sick yourself, you can experience the symptoms without anything physical being transferred between people. And it has to do with these mental aspects or psychological aspects of it.
Interesting.
So that's great. You just pull up a slide on it. That's awesome.
Is that pretty much it right there?
That's pretty much it.
Sam Tripoli and I are coming to your town. Catch us on the road doing Tinfoil Hat Comedy. Follow me on Instagram at Tinfoil Hat Comedy Night. May 4th, we'll be in Aurora, Illinois. And May 5th, Janesville, Wisconsin. Go to samtripoli.com for more information and to buy your tickets. See you on the road.
You know, there are some people that say this even applies, could go as far as death. Like there's a curse among Aborigine peoples in Australia. And that there have been accounts of where a shaman puts this curse on you, and then the person, you know, dies several days or weeks later, right? And everyone is afraid of these curses. And so could this be an example of the nocebo effect that goes all the way to mortality? I mean, you know, maybe there are supernatural forces. I don't want to rule that out. But from a scientific point of view, certainly this fear has been shown to produce these kinds of effects.
Now, viruses have never been seen, never been detected, or they are detected, they are seen, but they don't do what the mainstream tells you they do.
Right. Well, so there are particles that are seen when any type of cell is damaged or dying. And this has been known about for quite a while. Now, and these are seen on electron microscopes because they're too small to be seen on light microscopes. And electron microscopes are kind of hard to interpret because one, you can't see the cells living. Okay? So you don't know what's going on, like what happened before and what's going to happen after. It's just a snapshot in time. Like if you were standing in front of your door with your hand on the knob and the door halfway open, and you took a snapshot there, right, we wouldn't be able to tell if you were coming or going. So if you see particles right outside of a cell, are they coming into the cell or are they going out of the cell, right? You can't tell things without observing them. Now, there is some video footage of microscopes actually that show single cell organisms like amoeba, for example, undergoing a dying process, and you can see it fragment into 1 million particles. Okay, so we know that, right, it is real that when cells die, they fragment into these particles. And you could just think about it as a way of packaging up the debris so it doesn't, you know, damage other things. Like, you know, if you have something spilled, you put it in a trash bag, otherwise it's going to leak on your carpet on the way out the door, right? So it could be like that. Now, is that one of these amoeba dying pictures?
I don't know what is this, Hib?
It looks different from the one I've seen, but
no, I just pulled it. It says amoeba ruptures cell membrane and then
yeah,
dies.
I think that might be it. Yeah, so there you go. So you see the rupture there, and I think a lot of the stuff's going to leak out, and you can see it's kind of a lot of it is invaginated in those circular particles, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of fracturing is what we're talking about, and that can readily be seen, you know, on electron microscope images once it's recognized that the cells are dying. So, for example, there was a study that came out in the journal Kidney 360 where they looked at kidney biopsies, and some of these biopsies from the early 2000s, and they found the particles from those damaged kidney cells that looked exactly like coronaviruses. Like it had the corona particles around the edge. It was the same size. And in the paper, they actually said that there's no way to tell the difference visually from these kidney cell particles that had nothing to do with the virus and the particles that are said to be, you know, SARS-CoV-2, the virus they say was associated with COVID. And they even said that the little dots on the outside that were, you know, equivalent to the corona were made of a different, you know, a certain protein that they knew what it was that comes from the kidney cells. So in other words, not a spike protein, but this other human protein. And in that article, one thing they referenced another paper that was published by people from the CDC stating the same conclusion. And also they said, that there would have to be some specific label that could, be a marker for the particles that is specific to a virus. So in other words, you'd have to first discover a virus, then figure out what it's made of, and then do experiments where you can find something that binds to the virus only. So you have to like test it to that and test it to other things. Like it could be an antibody, but you'd have to make sure it's specific to the virus. Then you could couple the antibody to something that is fluorescent, right? This is called immunofluorescence or fluorescence in situ hybridization. There's different names. I could be slightly wrong about the technical names, but essentially then that specific antibody will bind to virus particles and then it'll fluoresce. And then you could, say that was what it's supposed to be, provided that it was specific to the virus and you already discovered the virus, so you could determine if it was specific for that. And those experiments never get done because there's no viruses that they could actually find first and find a specific antibody to. Instead, they find an antibody and they say, oh, this antibody goes to the virus. But of course, they can't know that because they've never actually found the virus and showed that it binds the antibody a certain way. It's just like with the PCR test that they had at EU, the first thing when you have a test is you got to validate it. Say, does this test measure what it's supposed to measure, right? Which would mean it would have to correlate with the amount of viruses in the sample, right? So they'd have to have a sample with viruses and do it and validate it on that sample of viruses, but they'd have to determine there were viruses there a different way, like in a microscope, for example. But of course they couldn't do that. So you know what they did? They made the DNA or RNA in a benchtop machine, an RNA synthesizer. And then they diluted it to known concentrations and they used that to develop the test instead of using actual viruses from a sick person or even viruses that they made up in a lab culture. They didn't even use those.
What do you, I think, why do you think they pushed or created the scamdemic? Was it to get rid of Trump or was there another reason?
Well, I don't think that had anything to do with them getting rid of Trump because most of his policies were right in line with the scamdemic, right? The race for the vaccine, I forget, what did he call it? He had some
Operation Warp Speed.
Warp Speed, there you go. Yeah. So, there were many reasons like within the globalist agenda. Some of them they were successful, some not. I think the main thing was to get people to take the injections.
Yeah, it was all about that. It's like the injections were first, and then they had to figure out, okay, how do we stick these in everybody?
Well,
then they have
even
to come
before
up with
that. Even before that, they, think about it. They had the whole world staying at home and shutting down every business, right? So, maybe it was a test to see, can we get the whole world to do this, at will by an operation, a propaganda machine, with the fake events. So that's there. There's also the digital ID / a social credit score system, right? They really tried hard to get people to do, health pass, vaccine. It was the Empire Pass in New York, right? And
all that died though. That all fell apart.
I know. Well, I'm saying that wasn't a success.
Yeah. Well, the conspiracy theory is it could have went, like the whole vaccine thing could have went at least two different ways. One way is it would have taken about 8 to 10 years to approve the vaccine. Correct? Isn't that typical?
Well, like every other one that's on the market? You mean?
Yes. So we're either gonna have the vaccine and it's gonna take 8 to 10 years to get it. And then meanwhile, we're setting up the infrastructure for a worldwide vaccine digital passport, right? It's going to take a while, to get it. Because what we found out,
They couldn't keep people being sick and believing in the fake disease for 8 to 10 years.
People still think it's real. There's only
Yeah,
like
but-
5 people that think like me and you that it was all fake. Most people think, oh, there's proof it was leaked from a lab. Look at all the gain of function emails from Fauci. People believe that's the truth. Like that's the conspiracy theory. I think like they want you to believe that's the conspiracy because if people believe that, yeah, a couple of doctors that, they'll throw under the bus, say, yeah, they leaked it, we're going to arrest them or whatever. But it makes the vaccine still legit, still real. So they really don't care if you think it was from a bat or a pangolin or some evil scientist that leaked it. Either way, it's real and the vaccine is needed. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And I agree with all those points, although I think, the people who embrace the fake lab leak hypothesis, I don't know if they're still getting vaccines. But nevertheless, I'm saying that if it were like, you had to wear masks and intermittent lockdowns and more vaccines, I don't think that would have been able to be carried out for a full 8 years. I think that people were getting fatigued and they turned it off at the right time, right? Because it would have worked against them because, there was the fear initially and the nocebo effect. Then you had all of the illness from the vaccines.
I think it was the illness from the vaccines that snapped everybody out. I think it was that.
So,
I think if the vaccines weren't put out, people would be waiting for them and wanting them. Like, when are they going to be done? 5 more years. When are they going to be done? And because the one thing we did learn is they did put in the vaccine passports, but we realized that they didn't have the infrastructure. They didn't know, like you could have lied about your jab easily. There was no global database. There was like a CVS database, a Rite Aid database, but there wasn't like a full, you could just make shit up. And they weren't ready for it. So the conspiracy theory with Trump is he had 2 choices. Cause he was anti-vax before. There's tweets. He's always been like not trusting vaccines. And then all of a sudden he's pro-vaccine. And then his son, Don Jr., always maintained anti-vax qualities, and they're tight as fuck. So maybe the people are thinking, conspiracy theorists are thinking Trump had a choice. Remain anti-vax and then have that clog up the news, anti-vax, drag it out for 8-10 years, or end all this shit, push the vaccine, 9 months, push it out, and there's gonna be casualties of war. You go one way, you go through this valley, 100,000 people die, but in war, you go through that valley, 10,000 people die. Either way, people are gonna die. And no matter how much Trump endorsed the vaccine with Operation Warp Speed, I wasn't gonna take it. And that may have been the thought, like, no, to be pro-vax, push the vaccine out way before 10 years, 9 months, and have it all fall apart, have all these injuries, casualties of war. You guys are stupid. You guys still took that shit. Go ahead. But what it did is it killed all the vaccine passport shit. All that shit's done. I got the stem cells in my shoulder.
We should let everybody know this is the place that's in Tijuana. It's run by Scotty Nelson, Ed Clay.
Yeah, Ed Clay, he's the man. Scotty Nelson, the man. I had just recovered from shoulder surgery and it wasn't recovering right. I re-injured it. I really felt like I was gonna have to go back in and redo it.
He was having a lot of problems with his knee, also on his shoulder as well. And so we did treatments on those 2 areas for him the first time he came down, and he got absolutely amazing results.
The first time I went in, it was just 1 shot. 5 months later, it's healed, 100%.
So really being able to help somebody that I care a lot about and have the opportunity to help make them better, it means a lot.
Eddie Bravo and Scott Nelson.
What's up?
How you guys doing?
How you doing? Is this thing on? Is this thing on? It's working?
Yeah, this week, one of my best friends, Eddie Bravo, is here getting stem cells for his back, getting stem cells for his shoulders.
Eddie and I go way, way back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When it first came to America,
I've known Scotty and Ed for 25 years, and they've always been this
awesome people, always trying to help people.
Eddie was really famous from the very beginning at Blue Belt of creating his own style of jiu-jitsu.
He's a problem solver in jiu-jitsu. He asked the very logical question that most jiu-jitsu practitioners were thinking but didn't ask back in the day, and that is, how do you deal with a person on top punching you? How do you break the posture of that in the guard and be able to keep them there? And that's what his style was based on, how to have an effective guard for MMA. And he's just evolved it to something that's truly amazing now.
You know, in jiu-jitsu, you're redlining your body on a daily basis. You know, I for sure couldn't roll anymore. I wasn't rolling at all. My shoulder was just a mess. I had just recovered from shoulder surgery, and it wasn't recovering right. I re-injured it. I really felt like I was gonna have to go back in and redo it. I came back to jiu-jitsu a little too early, which happens a lot with jiu-jitsu athletes. They just can't wait to get back on the mat. Right before I was gonna go in and get another surgery on my shoulder, that's when Ed approached me about trying stem cells to see if it works. And we did it, and it healed my right shoulder 100%. I didn't need surgery after all. It's still 100%, it's stronger than ever. It was amazing.
But it worked, man. My shoulder came back, and it's like, you know, a few months later, it's 100% now.
It's awesome having Eddie here because he's somebody that I've always looked up to, somewhat like a big brother to me the last 20 years. And you know, he's gone through a lot when it comes to injuries, just like a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners have. So really being able to help somebody that I care a lot about and have the opportunity to help make them better, it means a lot.
So Eddie, how you feeling?
Yeah, I feel great, man. I came down a mess. Man, I wasn't like, I couldn't play rubber guard at all. It's been over a year and a half since my surgery, and just doing this was, I'd feel it in here, just tender, but there's zero inflammation, and this does not hurt at all. This is incredible. This is incredible.
That's awesome.
I had major surgery on my shoulder about a year and a half ago as well. They reattached my bicep to my shoulder. It was falling off. You know, it feels good, but we'll see how over time, the stem cells, see what they do, because we just did the stems yesterday. We injected the shoulder, we injected the knee, and then we added some stem cells through IV. You know, it's gonna take a while to see how it all regenerates everything.
I went back to Ed and Scott, and you know, to see if the stems could fix my left shoulder like it did my right shoulder. This time, 4 different shots, you know, using ultrasound to really go right to the tears and really see the tears and hit them is just a lot more advanced now. My shoulder was really bad, my left shoulder. And I was having doubts, even though it fixed my right shoulder. I was like, my left shoulder was so bad. 5 months later, it's healed 100%.
The secondary benefit is regeneration. If there's thinning of the cartilage or the meniscus, or there's inflammation of the tendons or ligaments, or even tears, as long as they are not very big, stem cells can help regenerate those tissues and hopefully avoid surgery, which is what the majority of our patients want, ultimately.
I'm lifting, zero pain. I wasn't able to do bench press. You know, whether it be flat bench, incline or decline, I couldn't do it, man. You just feel it right in the labrum. There's just no way. But now I'm lifting, I've been lifting hard now for the past 6 months, and with zero pain, great results. I'm very, very happy that I went in and got the stems. Very happy.
It's the plump, dog. It's the plump.
There's nowhere else where you can go and spend a week that I know of in the world and get so many proven treatments all put together in a specific package to really make your cells perform better. That's why we're the Cellular Performance Institute.
We're starting to hear that there's a lot of unnecessary surgeries going on, and I would have gotten surgery on my left shoulder. I would have if I didn't have access to stem cells, but thank God I didn't need to go through that again. if you think you need surgery, if you had an MRI and the doctors are telling you you need surgery, look into some stem cells, CPI, look into that. You might not need to get all cut up, and that might be unnecessary. Just look into it, do a thorough research.
There's no vaccine passport. Completely done. It was too fast. And
Yeah.
the Biden
Well-
administration, they were talking shit on the 9-month deadline. They were like, what are you talking about? If he comes out with a vaccine by October, who's going to take that? It takes 8-10 years, to test. Who's going to take that? Biden said that. Kamala said that. Everyone said who's going to take that? A Trump vaccine that comes out in 9 months, it takes years to who's going to take that? But then when it finally got released, they all made a 180 and pretended that Biden put it out and then pushed everyone to do it. They made a complete 180 right there. That's sus. And you know what? Bottom line, vaccines are, oh man, there's more anti-vaxxers than ever before. Big Pharma is not, the trust for Big Pharma isn't there anymore. There's no more vaccine passports. That shit's fucking done, son. And they fucked up it's so obvious the vaccines hurt so many people. I think that's just gonna kill the whole. I think that people are gonna go back and start looking at like the measles vaccine and polio and all that shit and start analyzing that shit too, because really it was the same thing all the way through. Do you think any vaccines work?
Well, only if by working, you mean making you sick.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I think vaccines were never meant to fix anything. They were meant to hurt you. They were meant to hurt you and keep you weak and frail.
Or they're meant to make you a lot of money. I mean, so this, I agree with everything you said about what happened. Although, we don't know exactly what their plan or intent is, whoever is calling the shots and running things behind the scenes. But it was the top selling drugs ever in the history of the pharmaceutical industry, right? So even though, and they can't be sued.
Yeah.
Because of the immunity, because it was an emergency use authorization. And they made contracts, right? Some people have reported on the Pfizer contracts with countries all over the world. Essentially, they have no liability and they've enriched themselves with, the best-selling product ever. So it worked out well for the pharmaceutical industry, I think. It's interesting because many people have increased their awareness about vaccines, but we'd have to really look at the numbers and see, are people really choosing, are they generalizing this information, or are people saying, well, it's only this one that was an experimental one? Or they could even say now, there's an approved version of it that that one would not be tainted. It's hard to say how much the needle has moved over, but you made a good point about the infrastructure not being in place for the vaccine passport. And there's something very disturbing. I just witnessed this because I was traveling in the air, that TSA has a program. It's actually a voluntary experimental program, but everybody thinks it's just required for some reason, where they want you to take your picture at various airports and always if you're returning to the country and you're going through customs. And what that is they're gathering data to perfect their facial recognition software. So if you participate in that and pose for that headshot, you're actually helping them essentially create, the infrastructure for the system. And then if there's another emergency in the future and they have your facial recognition, right? Then if you get rid of the card or fake it, you won't be able to, because they'll be able to identify you, and they're already been putting surveillance cameras up more and more and more places, especially during COVID. So that infrastructure will, capture people if they opt in during another crisis.
Yeah, I figure when it comes to them taking pictures of you at this point, it's like you're looking in your phone all the time and there's facial recognition on your phone. Like they already got your face. There's you can't hide your face. That's over, right? I mean,
well, that may be true to some degree, but this, particular camera is specifically for the purpose of being able to, pick you out with artificial intelligence. It's not, just storing your image that later on, if you're investigated and someone can't find out what you look like, but you're a suspect in a crime, they can, go get this record and then find your face and then find you, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about every time you travel, no matter what, just from the cameras, if you walk into a place and, is this going to be shared with other travel as well, right? Bus terminals, train stations, all the border crossings. So now obviously some of these places you have to show your ID and a photo ID. But if we look at China, for example, where they're ahead of us in this surveillance, they already have a social credit system in place. There was an artist who, lived in Shanghai maybe, but there are so many cameras everywhere, right? That anytime you walk outdoors, you're on camera, and they have the facial recognition. And this is how, excuse me, how they can see if you are jaywalking, for example, then your social credit score will go down. So this artist mapped out, I think it was either only 1 or 2 blocks long, a path where you were not on any cameras. And it was like a very circuitous way they had to walk to avoid, essentially the camera coverage and be anonymous. And he gathered a group of his, supporters, and they walked this, and, and they made a film of it themselves. Interesting that they were still on camera. Well, this was found out about by the government, and they took away his studio and said he was prohibited from ever having an art show again.
You know what I think? We're so stupid that in the future, maybe that once they have cameras everywhere, they just have Big Brother everywhere, that people will end up paying for it, paying for the maintenance, paying for the upkeep by buying like their own mixtape of their life. Like for $20, they get like a mixtape of what they did all week, all over the city, driving around. The ones that'll probably sell the most are the ones where you're driving in your car. They'll put your favorite song over it as well too. You pay $25 and you get like, a bunch of like an edited highlight reel of you just living life.
And then you can watch it while you're locked in your micro home doghouse, eating processed food.
Exactly, and you're paying for everything.
And
but then you have a choice. Like most people will they'll end up putting most of the cameras along like the freeway and the streets, because they'll find that most people like shots of them driving their cars because of like, music videos. There's always like you're driving a car and you're singing along. You know what I mean?
Hopefully you're not picking your nose.
You can edit that out. You can go back and finalize the mix. You can request edits and tweaks. Go, boom. Can you pull out this frame and that frame and replace it?
Yeah, it'd be like in the old days with the Dolby noise filter. It'd be like the nose picking filter or embarrassing moments filter.
Oh yeah. AI will be able to pick those out.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll see that if your finger goes in your nose.
If you scratch yourself, all those kinds of things.
Now, staph infection is supposedly caused by bacteria, right? Not virus, right? It's mainstream says it's a bacteria, correct?
That's what they say, yes.
And bacteria you can actually see under a microscope, not like viruses, which are you still can't see them unless you have some crazy electron microscope, and who knows what they're looking at, their particles. But bacteria, a lot easier to see.
Yeah. Bacteria you can see, and I mean, they're still quite small. You need reasonable magnification, but you can see them moving around, eating stuff. You can, work with them in the laboratory, where that's what they are, because you can, see the colonies grow and then look at them microscopically. So, of course, I wouldn't say that bacteria are not real. They're everywhere. In fact, our bodies are made of more bacterial cells than human cells.
Now, how do you think, what do you think a staph infection is?
Yeah, well, I think that it's there's damage to the tissue that's infected. So like we can, talk about a skin infection. That's usually where they can find Staphylococcus bacteria. And so what happens is that there's usually from the inside some kind of toxicity, although you can get a staph infection from a cut or a wound as well. So it depends how it occurs. Like if it's cellulitis, it's usually from the inside, but if it's a wound infection, then it can be from the outside. But there's some kind of contamination that gets to the wound, either from when the wound occurs from the outside or brought to the wound by your white blood cells, which are responsible for processing toxins. And it irritates the tissue. And the tissue is damaged and cells die. And then the Staphylococcus bacteria will come to the site or to eat up the dead tissue. And that's the simple model. Now, that has not been directly proven when it comes to, human staph infections. But what I can tell you is that you'll find staph on your skin, whether you have a skin infection or whether your skin is not infected. So if it's the cause of skin infections, why aren't we getting skin infections all the time? Staphylococcus is there. So there has to be, another explanation. And by the way, that's the first step of Koch's postulates to prove that a, germ causes a disease, is that the germ has to be present in all cases of the disease and absent in cases without the disease. So, we can understand that that's not the case. But I just did a live stream earlier today talking about this issue in plants, because in plants we have direct evidence of this being the case. So if we look at insects having the same kind of role for plants that bacteria have in humans, right? Because we know that insects, we think they attack plants or infest plants, right? And anybody who's tried to grow vegetables has experienced this.
I'm Eddie Bravo, founder of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu with over 150 schools and over 30,000 soldiers worldwide. Music has always been my deepest passion.
Without that musical journey that I took, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I can't tell my music story without having my musical partner my whole life and best friend, Mr. James Watson.
I said, I want to be in a band no matter what. Oh, well, there it is. I gotta move to Los Angeles. I said, I gotta go to that place. If this California is supporting metal.
Me and James just started making music.
Mastering the Metal, the story of James Watson and Eddie Bravo. Print and audiobook available now.
So, but insects don't attack us, right? We have infections with bacteria where bacteria is said to attack us. But what they find in the plants is that they have a very easy way to measure the health of a plant. And it's called the Brick score. And it's a way to measure how much photosynthesis is going on in the plant. And this is the standard in botany and agriculture of a way to measure the health of the plant. So if the plants are healthy, like their Brick scores are 12 or 14 and higher, they go up to a maximum of about 20 in the leaf, they find no insects eating those plants. When we go below that level, depending on how poor their health is, you're going to have different kinds of insects eating them. Like the plants that are the least healthy, they're going to have aphids and other sucking insects like that. And you heard of plant defense chemicals, right?
No.
So those are like, you ever heard of, oxalates or lectins or things in certain vegetables that might, make you have like a gas after you eat beans, that kind of stuff?
Okay.
So plants, they can't run away from predators, so they use chemical warfare. They make different kinds of chemicals that repel insects. And when the plant is unhealthy, it doesn't have enough energy to actually make those chemicals. So the insects can eat it, no problem. But when it's fully healthy in that 12 to 20 range, right, then it makes those chemicals and no insects come and eat it. So it's the same thing with us. If our tissue is unhealthy, then bacteria or even fungus, depending on how unhealthy it is, because like the fungus is like the aphids for us. So when our tissue is really, really unhealthy is when you get the yeast and fungus like Candida and Aspergillus and things like that. But it's the bacteria when we're only a little bit unhealthy. So that tissue in the skin is unhealthy. And that means that it becomes now food for the bacteria, and they help get rid of it and recycle it. So it's actually a symbiotic relationship.
I have most of the time when one of my students, myself included, when staph pops up, go right to the doctor. You get on antibiotics, and within a week or two, it's gone. But I do have a couple students that are against all that, and when they get staph, they just let it ride out, and it takes about a month or so before it starts to heal up. But if you go to the doctor, you go to the ER with like some insane staph, they'll always tell you, like, if you waited one more day, you could have been dead. And everybody,
Really?
yeah, oh dude,
They tell you that?
everybody that gets staph, when they go to the hospital, they come back and go, dude, if I would have waited one more day, they told me I would have been dead. And so everyone that gets staph and goes to the hospital, they think they're gonna die. Yet no one is. I've never known any jiu-jitsu guy that died of staph. I mean, there's been some ugly incidents where they cut, and I had to get lanced on my leg. The weird thing is I got staph maybe 15 years ago, and it was under my, I have boxer briefs, and then I have pants on top of it. So there was no skin to skin contact at all where I got it like high on my hip. But you would think, like, if it was someone giving it to me, it would like be on my arms or something that were exposed to skin.
Well, I don't know who was in your pants, Eddie.
Exactly.
No, listen. Nobody thinks that these are contagious, actually, even in mainstream medicine. But because I think we're talking about like cellulitis, folliculitis, abscesses.
Yeah, like so staph. So
right?
most people think someone with staph can give other people staph.
Yeah,
They think that.
They even know that, even mainstream doctors know that that's not the case. But so I had almost the same exact thing as you, and this was back when I was in my residency, actually, in North Carolina. I got an abscess on the back of my thigh, and it was a little bit lower, than where my boxers, so not the exact place, but it just occurred out of the blue. I didn't know what happened. And, the whole area got infected. I did have to get it lanced as well. And after that time, every few months, I would get another infection somewhere on my skin. And I took antibiotics that time because it was before I realized all this stuff. It didn't help. It still took me like 6 weeks to get better from that abscess. And so then I was like, I just used bacitracin on it when I got it, but I don't think that made any difference. It still lasted a couple of weeks. Then I heard about turpentine. And I put turpentine on it the next time I got it. It was gone in 24 hours.
Where do you get turpentine? Turpentine, like, isn't that some kind of solvent?
Yeah,
you get at a hardware
the paint
store?
thinner, yes. Yes, it's actually from the sap of the pine tree. That it's just distilled pine sap. So it's not like a petroleum chemical product. It's a natural thing. And I found out from Dr. Jennifer Daniels about it. And it's been used for a long time in history. Actually, there's tons of medical articles about it, going back even to the 1800s. And there's even a study, Eddie, on skin abscesses and a study on folliculitis. So exactly the problem that we're talking about. And those were randomized controlled trials. They were done in Russia. And they both showed it was very effective, just like my experience. And so when I then did a full turpentine protocol, I never got a skin infection again. So the way turpentine works is, like you said, it's a solvent. So it basically, the crud that is irritating your skin, that damages it, that makes the bacteria come and eat up the dead and damaged cells, it just dissolves that crud, it's probably fat soluble toxins, and brings it to the liver or to the bowels so it can leave your body.
I got a question if it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Turpentine. This is something that I had a long conversation with Santos Bonacci. I don't know if you ever heard of Santos Bonacci.
Yeah, I know Santos.
Okay, he told me that turpentine is also, he has used that to parasite cleanse. Just wondering if you've heard of that, that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. So
thank you.
When that protocol that I was telling you about that I did, that's when you drip it on sugar and you take it internally. But, this is not something to just do willy-nilly. You have to have a protocol because you can have cleansing reactions. But I had worms, 10 inches long come out in the toilet. Excuse me. And I wasn't ill. I did it mostly to learn about the experience and its healing potential. I wanted to experience myself before I ever, talked about it with anyone else. And it was quite a shock. And then, of course, a lot of my clients who have done this over the years have sent me, toilet pictures of the worms.
Man, turpentine. I got to get into that. Now, when I was telling you about the student I had who, when he gets staph, and he's had it a couple times, and I've known him when he's had these staph infections, and he just lets them go, and he puts like some ointment topically, but he never takes any pills or any antibiotics or anything like that. What do you think? Is that something like, I know you don't do regular general practice anymore, but
no, I do. I work with every kind of health issue.
Oh, okay. So someone comes to you and says, "Doc, I got this abscess." What would you tell them? You wouldn't give them. You wouldn't give them antibiotics. You would tell them to put turpentine on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple of different things. I mean, one is if you want to recover from any acute condition as quickly as possible, the best thing to do is water fast. So if you break your leg, you start fasting right away, that leg's going to heal considerably faster. And you'll find this even in the mainstream research about wound healing and fasting. So I would always say to do something like that, if you're willing to do that, to expedite your body's ability to heal it. Now,
how long, if you broke your leg, for instance, like you mentioned, how long would you have to water fast for? A couple days, a week?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know that there's really research that tells you exactly the answer to this, right? So, but I would say a minimum of 3 days and up to 7 days. And it probably should be until the pain level becomes tolerable enough to move around. That might be, like a sign that your body will give you when you're ready to eat again. Because, when you eat again, then you want to provide really good nutrition, because whatever you eat is going to go into that repair. So, if you eat a bunch of crap's going to go in to try and repair that leg, and it's not going to be as good if you eat bone broth and things like that. Right? Think about like eating the things that are being repaired, right? So, like stuff from bone and cartilage and muscle and things like that. Or just, stay away from processed food and junk food during that time. But I think if 3 to 7 days is a good amount for, a broken bone like that. But any acute illness, even pneumonia, things like this, colds, you're going to recover more quickly. So, so with the abscess, now, generally speaking, when you get a skin infection, it doesn't start off as an abscess. So you want to, if possible, treat it before it gets to that stage. Now, if there is clearly an abscess, which means, there's fluid in there, a pocket of fluid that you can usually feel by pressing with your finger, that fluid needs to drain. You don't want all of that fluid to go back into your body. And that's the reason why you would get it lanced, right? But this is something you could do at home. I mean, it's not that complicated. You only need to make a relatively small hole. And you can get some sterile, Q-tips. And if you make a little hole big enough to stick those in and kind of gently, feel around and clean it out, and so that everything can drain. But just leaving it open, like that allows it to drain so that bad stuff, but that pus, right, that contains the whatever toxins are damaging your tissue, and a whole bunch of white blood cells that are trying to eat it up and sequester it and get rid of it.
Okay.
So you want to get that out, but then so if you just have like cellulitis where it's all red, or folliculitis where it's the hair follicles that are all swollen and red, you just basically take a drop or two of turpentine right on the skin. Don't put it on the open wound part, put it around the wound margin. It'll penetrate in there, but it might irritate, the already raw flesh of the wound. But if you put it around the margin, it'll be a little more gentle, and actually this will help with pain relief too. And it will just get in there, dissolve whatever poison is in that tissue, get it into the blood so that it can be excreted. And you want to, support that excretion maybe by stimulating the bowel movements with some laxatives like senna, or doing an enema, or soaking it in a bath so stuff can come out of your skin, like with Epsom salts or bentonite clay. Because if that stuff is going to get dissolved, you want to make sure it gets all the way out of your body, doesn't just float around and go somewhere else and then cause another infection down the road.
Staph is probably the most common skin infection that we deal with in the jiu-jitsu world, but also ringworm. And ringworm is a fungus. And can you explain the difference between like staph and ringworm and how?
Yeah, so, a couple of things. One is that the reason why this happens, right, in people who do your sport and other athletes, right, is because you're basically creating trauma on your skin all the time. Right, you're in humid conditions because you're always sweating, right? You're against these like rubber mats or whatever material, right, that often kind of gets wet. You're constantly, I know your place is very, very clean, but if you use certain harsh cleaning chemicals and you're rubbing against them and then causing trauma, right? You get those rug burns, you get scrapes, bruises, all that kind of stuff doing jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So that trauma brings your immune cells to that part of your body also. So if they're full of stuff, they might just deposit it at that part on the skin. And then depending on what you're in contact with, right? I mean, if you're wrestling around with some woman who's got cosmetics on her body and then they rub into, a rug burn on your skin, those things are full of poisons. So you see there's like many, many sources. Now, the difference between, ringworm, the so-called, fungal or dermatophyte infection, and a staph infection, which is bacterial, it has to do with the individual and how long they have been essentially toxic in their body. So the staph infection or the bacteria is more likely to occur when it's in early on, like someone is in very good health, but they have exposed to a little bit of toxicity. So maybe they went away for the weekend and drank too much and had some questionable food, and then they come back and get on the mats, and boom, then the staph infection hits. So you could think about some kind of recent insult to the health that might occur. With the ringworm, it's more of a longer term chronic issue that those folks who have a tendency to get that, probably they have other health issues, or they're on the verge of manifesting other health issues, like maybe things like diabetes or metabolic disease like that. And so they're going to manifest more of the fungal elements. So, just like what I talked about with the brick scores, depending on, like the overall health of the tissue.
I want that upper body clench. That's what I'm going after. With the underhook, looking for double underhooks. That's a juicy ass clench. Perfect double underhooks, you're on your side. Boom. That's all perfect. That's huge. In my game, for me, I'm like, I got this motherfucker. First fight in Abu Dhabi 2003 against Gustavo Dantas. I got right in and got perfect double underhooks. I'm like, oh my God, I had him in a lockdown, perfect double underhook, really quick. He just gave it to me. And I was just sitting there going, oh my God, he just gave it to me. That was just off a front headlock, 100%, push into him, you want to smash him.
and then jump on that leg. You want to rush them so they don't have so they're off balance. You jump on that leg, you hook that leg, you're gonna take their back or put them in the truck. Either one. Does that make sense?
The other thing could be that there could be different poisons in the skin that create a different kind of damage, and then the different, organisms clean up different things.
I used to get ringworm on a regular basis back in the 90s and early 2000s, like once every 3 months, it'd pop up somewhere on my body. And it was a big pain in the ass. And then I read somewhere that ringworm, it's an outside fungus that attaches to your skin and eats the stuff on your skin that your good bacteria usually eats. So if you don't have enough good bacteria in your system, then you have all this stuff on your skin that the outside fungus, the ringworm, will attach itself to, and now it has food. So when I heard that, I'm like, oh man. So then it said, people with a lot of natural good bacteria in their system won't get ringworm. Then I started eating yogurt every day and started taking acidophilus pills and probiotics, and I never get it. And I'm on that. I take a lot of supplements, but acidophilus, real good acidophilus probiotic formula. I take it almost every day. No more ringworm since I started doing that.
So that makes sense, Eddie, because you improved your terrain, so you didn't need to have that happen anymore.
It's just like your bug. It's just like your bug analogy, right? The bugs, they eat the leaves that don't have the right nutritional balance, right? So it's like if only the leaves that are unhealthy. In fact, there was this story that the scientist who studied this, his name's Thomas Dijkstra, told, where an insect dropped its larvae on the leaves of a tree. And they tested the Brick score of the tree at the time, and it was low enough that those larvae would eat it. But then the health of the tree improved pretty quickly over a couple of days. And now it was too healthy for those larvae to eat the tree. So they crawled to the end of the branch and waited for several days, but the tree stayed healthy, and eventually they just fell off and died on the ground. So it's like the organisms just will not touch it unless it is of the right characteristics that they can digest it and it's food for them, right? So when that tree got healthy, maybe it made some of those defense chemicals and they would have killed the larvae. So the larvae didn't eat it. They smelled it and they said, we know better. And they were just sitting there smelling and waiting for it to go away, and it never went away, and their time ran out. They starved to death. And this is observed a lot in the insect world. But there's something unique about bacteria and fungi that I want to expose you to, and it's kind of mind-blowing, but it's legitimate science, and I've looked at it, it's been published, and it's called pleomorphism. And it's really very almost identical to what we know about stem cells, except that there's a special kind of stem cell for bacteria and funguses. And there are a couple of different scientists who researched this, and they gave it different names. Like one of the names is somatid, protid, and microzyma. Okay, yeah, so pleomorphism is a term that means many shapes or changing shapes. And we know that many kinds of cells can change shape, and a lot of these are biopsy images that were brought up there. So you see there were healthy cells, and then they change shape, and they're said to be perhaps less healthy, right? So that's what that's demonstrating. But in this situation is that we start off with these particles like protids, and if you do dark field microscopy, which is like where you can look at living blood under a microscope. Now, they don't do this in conventional medicine, but there are many alternative practitioners who do this. And I would look at the work of Josh and Adam Bigelson to learn how to do it correctly, and they have amazing images. But you see all these dots of light. It's kind of like looking at the blood cells like as if they were superimposed against a clear night sky with all the stars behind them. And these
little particles that are shining, they're reflecting the light from the microscope. Those have been observed to change into all of the bacterial species and all of the fungal species. So in other words, all these microorganisms are really one and the same, and they can change from one into the other and into the other and complete the cycle. And there are scientists like specifically not Enderlein. Enderlein is one of the scientists, but there's a scientist from Canada who mapped out the cycle, and you can find images of the pleomorphic cycle where it shows how it changes shape. So in other words, on the skin, whether you have staph or you have a fungus or you have a strep or a different bacteria, and many of those things are found on normal skin, they can change from one into another depending on the circumstances in the environment. If the environment favors one, they'll be that one. If it favors a different one, they'll change into that. And it's not really coming from the outside. Even when those things come from the outside, it doesn't affect the internal population so much, because they just get with what's going on with all those microorganisms in our body and get with the program. So now I'm not saying that what you did didn't help the situation, right? But it helped it by improving the quality of your skin in such a way, right, including whatever the bacteria did that you took as probiotics, such that the fungus wasn't needed anymore, right? And maybe you ate a better diet. Maybe you had like plain yogurt instead of sweetened granola bars or something like that.
Yeah. These days, I'm constantly going back and reviewing mainstream mantras that you hear, like everything that they push. I'm like, you got to go back and analyze what we've been told growing up. And one thing that everyone will tell you, mainstream doctors, mainstream media, is like, drink 8 glasses of water a day. So I was thinking, what if, they are pushing water, stay hydrated, 8 glasses of water. I'm like, what if the more water we have in our system, the more diluted our system is? I started thinking about that. I'm like, nah, there's no way that's true. Water's got to be good for you. Keep drinking water, And then I saw this video, some random dude on Instagram, and I don't know who the fuck he was, but he was saying, hey, listen, we drink way too much water. We don't, our tongues aren't designed to drink water from like a puddle. And we usually drink waters from a cup, which is totally not natural. We're designed to get our water from food, and that's it. We're not designed to drink water from cups. And it sounded crazy, but it went back to what I was thinking, like 8 glasses of water a day. They keep pushing that. Like what? And then you hear from someone else saying, hey, you know what? Inside scoop is, while you're eating a meal, don't drink anything, because that dilutes your enzymes. And so now I'm starting to really think like, damn. And then you start thinking about camels. Camels, everybody knows camels. They could survive forever without any water. What do you think about and then I hear another thing. Because I'm all into fasting now, and so are you. Now here another video I saw. I don't know, this could all be bullshit, but this other guy said, hey, dry fasting works 3 times better than water fasting. If you could fast without water, then it increases the healing properties 300% or some shit. What do you think about that?
Well, this is a key topic, and I've spent a lot of time investigating this, every aspect of this. And well, first of all, like dry fasting, there's not actual data to support that it's better. There are some people who are very enthusiastic about it. I agree. It also can be fatal. So if you do it too long, so you have to be very careful. Now, water fasting is extremely safe. In fact, it's been studied in the mainstream scientific literature for safety up to 21 days, and there's essentially no complications.
For all your 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu merchandise, please visit 10thplanetjj.com/shop. We also got a Look Into It t-shirt that just dropped. Thank you very much for your support.
So the thing is, for healing is different because, fasting is a healing protocol. And in my opinion, we need more water to heal. Like, for example, I was working recently with some clients with heart failure. Now, heart failure, right, is when your heart basically can't, allegedly pump enough blood. We can talk separately about that the heart may not actually be a pump. But what happens is that the blood backs up into the lungs and causes what's known as pulmonary edema, and then people can't breathe, right? And so when they go to the hospital dehydrates them. They give them diuretics to, take fluid out of their body. Now, the diuretics don't take fluid specifically from the lungs, right? It uses the kidney to get just fluid off the body. And then they also tell them, you can't drink much water. You can only drink this much. Now, what I told them I thought would be much better than that would be the exact opposite. That they should consider drinking 3.5 to 4 liters of water a day, stop the diuretics. Now, if there are any doctors or nurses out there, you're ready to report me for malpractice because I'm doing the exact opposite of what is the standard of care. I'll tell you what, though, in 2 days, they had no shortness of breath and no evidence of pulmonary edema whatsoever by doing that, right? By taking more water. So and I've had this experience, not just with heart failure, but practically with every healing condition. So I think it's much better to have too much water than too little because you won't actually dilute your body because your kidneys are amazing regulatory machines. And if you have too much water, but not enough salt and minerals to go around, your kidneys can get rid of just pure water. So they will take care of that issue. And there are some people who think if you drink like distilled water or reverse osmosis water, that it will leach minerals out of your body, but that's not the case at all. Because it's what actually happens is the water goes into your gut, and no matter what water you drink, even mineral water, because no drinking water has nearly as much minerals as in our tissues, our body fluids. That's why if you ever, tasted blood, it's really salty. You couldn't drink it. It would taste like seawater. So the minerals get secreted into the water when it's inside your gut, right? Out of the body into the gut. And then when the water you just drank has enough minerals that leached out to make it the same as the tissues in your body, then the water and those minerals get absorbed back into your body. So they only temporarily leach out, then they go right back in. And they take the water you drank with it. So there's no problem drinking pure water. I think, our bodies are made of 70% water by weight and 99% water by molecules. Like 99 of every 100 molecules in your body is water. So it's important we have enough of it. We're losing it all the time, right? Just me talking, I'm losing water. It comes out of your breath, right? It comes out of your mouth. We sweat, we urinate. There's water in feces, right? So we're losing water almost everything we're doing. We have to replenish that. Now, if we look at other animals, they don't, depending on what their diet is, but if they have a natural diet, they don't drink as much water as we do. And why is that? Well, it's like you said, they get it from food. But the thing is, all the food they eat is raw. If they're carnivores, they eat raw meat. If they're herbivores, they eat raw grasses and other plant matter. We eat predominantly cooked food. When you cook food, the water leaves it. You're dehydrating it. We even eat food that's purposely dehydrated, right? Like things like beef jerky or dried fruit to concentrate those things or make it last longer. But So it is, I do agree. So when I talk to someone about doing a raw diet, like for a cleansing protocol, like a fruit diet, for example, that's all raw, I tell them not to drink during mealtime for exactly those reasons, because they'll dilute the nutrients. It'll be harder for their body to absorb it. The body will have to do more work. But if they're eating cooked food, if we're eating cooked food, then we need to take at least a little bit of water to kind of rehydrate the food so that it's easier for our body to absorb the nutrients.
Okay, so water's good. I was thinking, damn, maybe I'm drinking too much water.
Well, the important thing is to make sure the water you do drink it doesn't have a bunch of chemicals. And
Yeah, it can't be
plastic.
tap water. It's got to be filtered. Generally,
And it can't be bottled water in plastic bottles.
really.
Yeah, because they've done studies on that. They found over 2,000 chemicals.
And like Poland
Eddie, for
Springs.
you,
and-
you know that some of the plasticizing chemicals are, estrogens.
which makes you more of a woman.
It makes you less manly.
Yeah.
It's
I need a
not
little
good
bit
for
of
you
that,
if you're a
little
woman
too
either.
Yeah, man. So you're also you're on the carnivore diet, right? And you do you're all over the research on that too, right? Because are you right?
Well, I predominantly eat meat and fruit now. I was doing carnivore for a while. I added fruit, and I gained some weight adding fruit. I'm planning to do. I have over 200 people in my membership. We're doing the turpentine protocol together, and I'm going to do a strict carnivore diet, special, carnivore diet for that.
Now, do you some people that are into carnivore, they don't eat salads at all. They think salads are unnecessary.
Well, the carnivore diet is only meat or animal products, right? So some people might include some dairy. I think almost most people include eggs. There are some people who don't even eat eggs. But salad is not on the carnivore menu.
And
But-
why wouldn't it be? Why not carnivore with some salad?
Well, listen, you can choose to do any diet you want, and if you do have a little salad with your carnivore, it's probably not going to,
Why would they?
It's not going to
Why are
make
they
you
saying?
unhealthy.
Why are the carnivore experts? Why are they saying, you don't need salad? Don't throw salad in there. What's
Well, because you don't need it. You don't need it to be healthy. So you can look at this a couple of ways, Eddie, but just look at macronutrients, right? We have fat, protein, and carbs. Now, only 2 out of those 3 are needed for survival, right? And that's fat and protein. You can never touch a carb and be just fine. In fact, babies who are nurse feeding, they essentially have very few, if any, carbs. They're in a ketotic state. And so the reason I think why a lot of them would avoid salads is simply they don't want to put any carbs at all in their diet. And now there also, there is some concern among some carnivores, some more than others, about some of these plant defense chemicals. And some people are very sensitive to these things and do have health problems, or at least don't have optimal health. The nutrients that are in plant foods, like salads, for example, because one of the reasons people think you need to eat your vegetables is because they're said to have, all these vitamins and minerals. And if you just find the amount of these things in some vegetables, they are a decent amount, but you have to look at the details. So one thing is that minerals, for example, many of them you're not going to absorb any of that mineral from that plant food because it's contained in a chelating substance that holds on to it. Sometimes those chelating substances, they're called anti-nutrients, they can actually pull minerals out of your body. Like kale, if you eat tons of raw kale, it will pull iodine out of your body. And there were a group of kids that were drinking a lot of cow's milk, and the cows were fed a lot of kale, and they developed thyroid problems from not having enough iodine. So the one thing is the nutrients are not as absorbable because of that. And then the other thing is some nutrients are just not made by plants. So plants, don't make B12. They don't make cholesterol. Very few plants make any saturated fats, and most of the fats in our body are saturated fats. Plants don't make vitamin D. They don't make vitamin K2. Now, you can ferment some plants, and it will make another version of vitamin K2 that is usable by our bodies, but it's not exactly the same. And there's another great example like this with vitamin A. I grew up being told that carrots are great, especially for your vision, because they have tons of vitamin A. But vitamin A is only made by animals. There's zero vitamin A in carrots or any vegetable. So all those orange vegetables, sweet potatoes and peppers and such that we're told have vitamin A, they actually have beta carotene. Now, beta carotene in our bodies can convert it to vitamin A, but we need 19 beta carotenes to make one vitamin A. So if they say there's so much vitamin A, they're not doing that 19 to 1 conversion, right? You have to kind of know the details to get that out. So we're going to be like deficient in vitamin A if we, unless we eat some kind of meat that has it in there, or we have to eat, 2 bags of carrots a day.
Now, what about people that say, oh, but you need the fiber and the roughage?
Yeah, well, this is something that a lot of the carnivore doctors who research this are really looking into, and there's really just no evidence that you need fiber.
Really?
Or that it's good. I mean, just forget about all of the, information you've heard growing up that you should, eat a lot of fiber and such like that. And I'm not saying you can't be healthy if you eat a lot of fiber. I'm not saying that at all. But why does fiber make you go to the bathroom more?
Because
do you have any idea?
They'll say, I mean, if I had to guess, just on what I've heard, like the fiber flushes your system and cleans it out.
Yes, right, because it stays in your gut, right? Now, food is supposed to get absorbed into our body, not stay in our gut, right? The only thing that stays in our gut is not food, and it comes out the other end. Now, so fiber, right, we can't digest it all. It's made of cellulose. And it has to go through because it's not useful. Our body can't utilize it. So then you got to ask the question, well, should we even be eating it if it's technically not food? Is this function of, scraping the inside of our gut, is that helpful or not? And there really just doesn't seem to be strong evidence that it's helpful when you look at the clinical studies.
Wow, another hoax. Eggs are way better than we were told they were, right? There's a lot of guys.
Eggs are great, but it's the yolks that are the healthy part. And remember when everyone was eating egg whites only?
Yeah, that's all bullshit.
That's the opposite. It's like, if you're going to eat only part of it, eat the yolks.
Yeah, that's where all the nutrition is, right?
Yeah, all of the fat soluble vitamins, which, they're in there first, right? Because where is the embryo, right? It's in the yolk first, because first that it needs to grow, and put on size and structure, and it needs those fat soluble vitamins for that purpose. Like Weston A. Price did some amazing research, and he found out the reason why we have crowded teeth and need braces and have to get our wisdom teeth taken out is because our diet changed and we no longer got enough of the fat soluble vitamins A, D, and K2, right? The things that are in grass-fed butter, liver, and other animal products principally. And of course, vitamin D, which we make from cholesterol, and we get lots of cholesterol from eating animal fat. And we can be out in the sun and convert that to vitamin D. But when we started, eating cornflakes and stuff like that and stopped eating, we're told that those foods were unhealthy. Then the jaws started shrinking. There wasn't enough room for all the teeth, so they got crooked and had to be pulled, etc.
Man. Now, what is, does it matter how you eat your eggs? Is raw the best way, or poached, or hard boiled, scrambled? Does it matter? Fried eggs? Is that the same? If you just fried your eggs like sun side up, is that good enough to get
Well,
your?
you know, there are a lot of people that have all kinds of different opinions about these things. I think that you should eat them any way you like. So eating them raw is totally fine, and a good way to eat them. Frying them is also fine with me. The important thing is that you use a healthy fat to fry them in. So don't use any seed oils, because those are quite poisonous. But you know, do it in butter, ghee, bacon grease,
Tallow?
lard, tallow. Yeah, all great sources.
Okay. All right. What are you totally into right now? What's the latest thing that, what rabbit hole are you going down? Doesn't have to be about nutrition or medical stuff, but it sounds like your girlfriend is really into old world technology and stuff like that, right?
She definitely is. But for me, it's really been about the law. Actually, that's where I've been focusing a lot of my research there. You know,
Like what?
well, like went at the event that I was at, I actually spoke about this and talking about, you know, like who we actually are in the legal system, or talking about, you know, finance law, loans, negotiable instruments, banking, taxes, some, you know, historical context, you know, all kinds of things like that. Like, you know, you know that we're not really required to pay income tax, right?
Yeah, I've heard that for decades. And then, but anytime you try to challenge that, they go after you. Like, remember Wesley Snipes said he wasn't going to pay taxes, and they just basically buried him. If you
Yes, well,
if you get vocal with that, don't they? They come after you, right?
Well, see, the thing is, what happens is that some people find out some things about the law, but they don't really learn enough. And then they go and do stuff when they don't really fully understand it, and they get in trouble. Like, so there's a guy, Dave Champion, who he's written a pretty prominent book about this. I can't recall the name. But he was called, and he tells the story on some interviews, but he was called by the Wesley Snipes team. And what happened is Wesley Snipes, he didn't do any of this himself. He trusted people who shouldn't have been trusted because they just, you know, believed in a certain strategy and they pursued it even when it wasn't going well. And then what happened? And then they didn't know how to help Wesley figure it out. And so he had to serve some consequences. But the truth is, it's quite easy to deal with taxes. And it's even if it doesn't go well, you can still deal with it, and because you can essentially settle all of it with paper. So, you know, this is part of this. The real way the system works is everything is about moving numbers around and fixing the books. And it's unfortunate that he and whoever was helping him didn't really understand this. But the simplest way to, you know, not pay taxes is simply not to make any agreements with the IRS. So if you previously made agreements with them, you need to, you know, then not do that anymore. Like, don't sign any tax returns, for example. Now, if you're an employee, it's a little bit more difficult, but if you have your own thing or you're, you know, just getting like 1099 type income, it's quite easy. You just form a new, you know, company like an LLC. You could even do a trust if you want. There's different structures, but different, you know, something different that doesn't have an obvious tax liability. And you get an EIN for that entity. And, you know, you make sure you draw up the documents correctly. And there are lots of people who can help with that, like John J. Singleton. And then you set up a banking account and you just have your income go into that bank. And then the IRS never suspects that there's a tax liability because you didn't file any tax papers. And you can go about your business. And, you know, when people get in trouble, like criminal trouble with the IRS, it's because they committed fraud in some way. They agreed to pay taxes by signing, but then they cheated on it somehow, right? Now, maybe they were actually in the right, but once you agree, you agree. And the only way there is a way to unagree once you agree, but you have to get that exact document that you agreed to in order to do that. And you could do it all on paper. But rather than getting into that mess, if you just don't agree, then there's no fraud. Okay, so all the stories that you heard about, like even in that movie, America from Freedom to Fascism, right, where it goes over some of those stories where, you know, somebody's business was raided by the IRS and they took everything, kicked them out, and held their property for a long time. And in the end, they didn't charge them with anything. Well, the only way they could do that is because that business owner paid taxes and signed their name. And then, you know, they found evidence of a mistake, and maybe it wasn't an innocent mistake. Maybe it was their accountant who made a mistake and they didn't know anything about it, right? But it was because they agreed that now they had liability, and the IRS was exercising, you know, their authority based on that contract. So the key is just not contracting with the tax authority, and then they won't even contact you.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. I'm 12 years living proof of it. 12 years now. Just so you know. Yeah.
So you know exactly what he's talking about?
Yes.
So you don't need me, Eddie. You already got the right friends.
No, well, yeah, 12 straight years, man. It's once you get over that, in my opinion, that second year hump, you're over the hump, man. Like you'll feel a lot better. You're like, dude, this was bullshit for so long. And yeah, 12 years, man. Even before it was popular. So just wanted to put that in there. Thank you.
That would be nice to not have to pay taxes. That would be nice. You just hear so many horror stories. I do believe you though. I've heard about this, like, you know, when the income tax got signed into law or whatever, 1913 or something. I know a little bit about it. And yeah, obviously there's, you know, taxation is ridiculous these days.
Well, you know, also the income tax does not pay for the services and infrastructure of our nation. There was during the Reagan era, they had something called the Warren Commission that actually investigated this, and the amount of, you know, interest due to the Federal Reserve for them borrowing currency, right, and issuing T-bills was exactly equal to the income tax collected in the years that they looked, right? So that money is just paying back that debt. The money that funds, you know, bridges and highways and pays the government salaries and all that comes from the other taxes, right? Like the liquor tax, the communication tax, the tolls that you pay, you know, the tax on your cable bill, and all of those things.
People still got cable? Hey, I'm gonna let you go.
No, your ISP.
I'm gonna let you go, Andrew. Anything else you wanna? How can my audience reach you?
Yeah, my website, andrewkaufmanmd.com. I've got Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. More free speech on Rumble, of course, but find me on all those platforms.
And we could find out the protocol for the turpentine thing you're doing?
Yeah, on my website, it's called the Power of Pine Workshop. So that'll give you all the details, yes.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you, man.
Great to see you, Eddie.
Keep spreading the truth. Thank you.
There's a lot of architecture in the world today on every continent of buildings that are much, much larger than you would think people of our height would build.
Cities in America that look as though they were constructed in medieval Europe.
The outside's incredible, but the inside is built like a palace. I'm not sure if there were even any schools of architecture back then.
How did they know how to do this thing?
We're at the pinnacle of our civilization now. This is the best it gets. The best we've ever done. Look at the quality of these walls.
Now you'll go through a neighborhood and every home looks the same.
Had we known we're going backwards, everyone would be pissed.
As an architect of 20 years, I like to look at a building as telling its own story. I like to say that stones don't lie.
And they're giving us timelines of like a year. It was built in a year.
The history that we've been told is a lie.
Why would a regular-sized human make something so massive?
How did they build that beautiful, beautiful building? Was that building here longer?
I feel like the building was here already.
What was actually in the towers? What kind of technology was up there?
These buildings were built by the prior civilization.
A beautiful, easy, graceful method of travel flushed down the drains.
Nope, no more airships.
And they have to lie to us about it. They had to write the storybooks. We learn about one fire, the Chicago Great Fire.
There were fires in every major city.
Burned to the ground.
It's impossible for any stone building to be burning down.
What's being kept from us is huge.
What a world it must have been.
So there's literally been a cover-up of history more than one way.
The Jiu-Jitsu Dojo is the ultimate training ground for life. Jiu-Jitsu will accelerate the evolution of your being, your consciousness, your soul. Through this amazing art, you will prove to yourself that you can master anything you set your mind to.
Happy birthday, Eddie Bravo!
I leave for Brazil tomorrow.
Are you the Fear Factor guy?
I'm like 6 pounds over. Time to sweat it out. Just imagine someone that has no idea how different your game is.
I'll tell you what this weekend was, man. It was a culmination point where all your hard work comes to like one great moment in time. You showed that you're a fucking champion, guy who goes against convention. You created your own shit and figured interesting ways to get around problems in jiu-jitsu. And shows you that great things are possible if you work hard, if you dedicate yourself, and you use your creativity, and you push through. Your own human potential just goes up.
My 10th Planet Association has grown rapidly to over 70 academies worldwide, and their curriculums are all synced to 10th Planet headquarters located in downtown Los Angeles. I'm Eddie Bravo. I hope to see you on the mats.
You can tell it's real because it looks so fake.